Okay, well, why don't we get started? Howard Jacobson, thank you for joining this conversation. I want to thank the people who are tuning into our talk at 11 a.m. Eastern time I think this is now the 9th of the conversations we've had with SAPIR authors, and it is a real honor and pleasure to welcome Howard. I suspect everyone on this call knows you from your novels, from The Finkler Question, from Jay, from Zoo Time, many novels over many years, widely accoladed both in Britain and the United States, including with a Man Booker Award, which as opposed to most American literary prizes actually means something. But most importantly for our purposes, the author of, I have to say this, my favorite essay, and there are some very good ones, but my favorite essay thus far in the 3 issues of SAPIR, Advice to a Jewish Freshman, which appears in our third issue, which is on the subject of Jewish continuity. With that introduction, I want to welcome you, and I really want to, if you don't mind, Howard, I'd like to begin by just sort of getting an update, because I suspect most of the people on this call will be in North America. Having something of an update about the Jewish question in the UK as it stands now. We just had this uproar with the Israeli ambassador to the UK having to essentially rush out of the London School of Economics, where I have a degree, by the way.
Are you giving it back?
I'm considering it. I never valued it that highly in the first place, but now I'm really considering it. This was widely condemned by not just the Jewish Chronicle, Priti Patel, a number of other British political figures, as anti-Semitism. It follows on a 5 or 6 year period where anti-Semitism really came to the center of UK politics in a way that I can't remember it ever being there before. It also follows on Jeremy Corbyn being humiliated and rousted out of power, and a new Labour leader being outspoken in his denunciation of anti-Semitism. So with all of that being said, are things in your sense a little better, a little worse, the same as they were in the last few years when it comes to the status and security of British Jews?
It's very, very hard to tell. The ousting of Jeremy Corbyn, the humiliation of Jeremy Corbyn, was a cause for celebration amongst the Jews of Britain. We'd done a fair bit to make that happen. We'd stood up for ourselves. The position of British Jews into which I'd been born, and even generations after me, which is that you don't let on much. If you don't let on that you're here, the English might not notice that you're here, and it might be all right. They might not kick us out again. Stay quiet, stay stumm, my father always said, stay stumm. What Corbyn did, Corbyn helped us really by making it perfectly clear that did not work, that was not working. That no matter how stumm we were, they would still spot us. And no matter how little we said about our Jewishness, we would still be there making these vast sums of money that the left could not bear, and planning to take over the world, and being 5th columnists for Israel and all the rest of it. So this time we thought, okay, a majority of Jews actually in the country spoke up and even demonstrated. Jews demonstrated on the streets of London. Jews demonstrated outside Parliament. Nobody had ever seen such a thing before, not for 50 years anyway, not since there was Mosley and the black shirts came that period in English life, and that seemed to work, and we felt things were all right now. And the Labour Party has had to go very quiet. It still harbours many a Corbynite who will still say many a Corbynite thing, which for which he might be told to shut up or even kicked out of the party. But the Labour Party is now much quieter than it was, though a lot of us don't believe the Corbyn influence has gone. What's happened, though, is go on, you were going to ask me something.
Well, I wanted to ask you in terms of, I mean, Keir, what is it, Starmer, the new Labour leader, I think he has a Jewish wife.
He does.
He has been outspoken. I mean, has there been a kind of lustration in the Labour Party when it comes to the Corbynite anti-Semites, or has it just been sort of swept under a rug?
Both. What pleases me about Starmer, apart from my thinking that he's a very decent man, we worry about whether he's going to be effective enough, but there's no question he's a very decent man, is he's finally taken on this business about is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism? And he's been very clear about the fact that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, but criticism of Israel is not necessarily anti-Semitism. And he's done that very well. And that needs, I feel that's the thing that needs hammering away again and again. Because the moment you speak up in defense of in any way in defense of Israel, it is assumed that you're trying to silence, that's the usual argument. You're silencing criticism of Israel, as though anyone has succeeded in silencing criticism of Israel. The idea that we'd even attempt such an act is a kind of madness. He's been very good about that. Look, to stigmatize Zionism and call it a racism is monstrous, but that doesn't stop you from being able to criticize this or that act of any particular Israeli government. That's very good. So where that's not operating, I'll just say this one sentence, and then where that's not operating is our universities, and our universities are now the problem. And hence my letter to a freshman.
That's exactly it, and this gets us to your essay. I mean, this is a phenomenon that is happening across. I say North American because I think it may be even more pronounced in Canada than it is in the United States. But at least in the United States, there's a much larger Jewish population, a much larger Jewish student population. I don't know if that's quite the case in Great Britain, where the Jewish population is just much smaller as an overall percentage of the country. But you must, I mean, this essay of yours must have been inspired by stories of what your friends' children or grandchildren are experiencing as they go to Cambridge or Oxford or LSE or elsewhere. What are the sort of things you hear?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. I've not taught at a university for decades now, so I don't know what it's like. In fact, I stopped teaching at universities before this had even got going. I encountered very little of this. The stories that I hear now is that Jewish students don't do what all students used to do when they're leaving school and going to university, which is to choose the university that will best suit them for the subject that they want to read. On top of that, they now have to choose the university that's least anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. I sat in a room with children of my friends and hear them go through the list. You can't go to that one. You can't. I'd say, well, this is a good university. Yeah, that's a good university, but you can't go there because that's impossibly anti-Semitic. They have a list.
Wait, hang on. So in that case, there must. I doubt there's a formal list, but what do you hear is the most? What are the most or least anti-Semitic universities in?
Oh God, I haven't got that list in my mind. For a long time, I thought Bristol was the worst because Bristol was the home of, is he called David Miller, that academic who saw every Jewish student who disagreed, we called them out, every Jewish student who disagreed with him was in the power of the Israeli government. So we're speaking for this idea that this network of young Jews, all of whom are being paid by the Israeli government. And eventually the University of Bristol got, only very recently and with much reluctance, got rid of him. In fact, the Jewish students that I've talked to said, "Oh no, that's nothing like so bad." But I can't now tell you. I'll compile a list and send it out to you if there are people thinking coming over and they want to know where's safe. I'll happily do that with their advice. There does seem to be a lot of people wanting to go to Nottingham at the moment. Yeah. Nottingham seems to be safe. Don't ask me why, but Nottingham seems to. But this could change any moment. It's very much to do with the fluctuations of the left. And it only needs one academic, one powerful academic with a strong presence and confidence to turn up at a university and inflame it, because they're powder kegs for all sorts of reasons. The left, what simmers in these universities is the old left hostility to Jewishness and to Israel, combined, of course, with the power of many Islamic groups who've got their own reason to be suspicious of Israel.
Well, I wanted to ask you about this because, I mean, you know, if you're of a certain age, you think of British anti-Semitism in the person of Oswald Mosley in the black shirts and a kind of a sort of a pronounced, essentially Tory anti-Semitism, right? That was the tradition. Is there any of that left, or has contemporary British anti-Semitism become essentially a left/Islamist phenomenon in the UK?
Yeah, I think there's been a complete turnaround, which doesn't mean that I don't think there are no anti-Semites left in Tory England. I'm sure there are, but the Tory party has nailed its colours to the mast of pro-Zionism, pro-Israel, pro-Jewish, and it wouldn't dare allow anything anti-Semitic to be said. Wouldn't dare. Boris Johnson wouldn't allow it. Whatever else there is to be said about the Tory party, and there's lots. There is no fear of that kind. What's said instead by the left is, oh yes, well, the Tory party is offering to be superior to Labour about anti-Semitism, but there is its own Islamophobia. Well, I'm not a student of Islamophobia, so I can't say anything. But that's the narrative anyway, that the left is anti-Semitic, except that they say they're not, and the right is Islamophobic. Now, when you look now, the anti-Semite is not a Mosley. He's not a black shirt. He doesn't wear boots. He doesn't carry a riding crop, and he doesn't ride a horse. He's completely different, and he's likely to have done social studies at a university. So he's a very different kind of being. He's read a certain kind of literature which the Mosleyites would never have read, and of course, at the centre of it, and this is why anti-Semitism is so influenced by Islamic groups at university, at the center of it is Israel. There is no dodging Israel. There are periods when we talk about all that here, when we go, try not to mention Israel, that deflects from it. Or if we give them Israel, we give them too much. But I don't think there's any dodging Israel. I think Israel is absolutely at the heart of it, which doesn't mean that those of us who cry anti-Semitism have to be wildly pro-Israel. I think you could feel the wrongness of this and not give two hoots about Israel. Personally, really, you don't have to love Israel, but you cannot miss the fact that Israel is powering this. Not just because.
Let me get to the Israeli question in a second, and in particular, your wonderful line about Sarah Silverman in your essay. But just stay with me for a moment on English politics. So you had this Corbynite movement in which prominent British Labour members, many of them Jewish, not all of them Jewish, literally broke with the party over Corbyn. Now with Starmer, clearly a different direction. Is British Jewry still loyal to Labour, which was their home politically, much as the Democratic Party is in the United States, for generations, or has that shifted at all?
They say they are going back. They say little by little they are going back. There is sufficient faith in Starmer for them to go back. Without naming names, I still think there are a few fairly senior people in Labour who, if they were to get power, could change that dynamic. But as long as Starmer and pro-Starmer Labour MPs hold sway there, I think many previous left-leaning Jews will go back. Many left politicians are returning, and many people are returning to just ordinary Labour voters are returning. But there's still a suspicion. I think there is still a worry, because it was too big a thing. It seemed to be too ingrained in the party to just go away because they lost one election.
Right. There's a wonderful, now I want to just turn now to your essay, and I really, there's so many gorgeous turns of phrase, but there's something you say here that I'd love for you to expand on or expound. you say, but if there's one position above all, and this is you entreating an imaginary Jewish fresher or freshman, you say, if there's one position that I entreat you not to adopt, it is that of a supine, conciliatory Jew who believes he can remain outside the fray. And then you add, here's what not to say. Why are you picking on me when your actual argument is with Israel? I am just a Jew standing on the other side of the street. I have no part of this. I suspect that that's a line that you've also come across in your personal life that inspired this train of thinking.
Yes, many a time. And for a while, I espoused it. For a while, I thought that was the case. Look, why am I being attacked because of what's going on in Israel? I don't approve of some of those things myself. I'm not going to be held responsible for that. And many a friend to this day, as was said to me only a few days ago, this day says that we must not be seen to take the side of Israel when several cruel things, many cruel things, are done in Israel's name. What it now seems, what's wrong with that, it now seems clear to me, is the minute you say, don't attack me for being a Jew because of what happens in Israel, I'm not Israeli, you are conceding that they have a real case against Israel. And you have to be very careful what you concede. You must never, I think, concede that there is anything wrong ab ovo from its origins in Zionism. There is nothing wrong with Zionism. Zionism may have turned horrible. Zionism, say it as much as you like, Zionism may have molded. Zionism might be a huge disappointment to those who believed in it so devoutly in the early years. And what a good case that would be to make. Why don't they make it? Those who want to say, why don't they say, look, Zionism was a beautiful thing. It made some mistakes, but it was a beautiful ideal for Jews to have a new life, for the Arabs with whom they would work and live to have a new life. It could have been terrific. The fact that it's gone wrong, insofar as it has gone wrong, is a bitter disappointment to us all. But they can't say that because they need those who attack Zionism, not Israel, Zion. They need Zionism to have been rotten from the start. That was the Corbyn position. Corbyn more or less voted himself out because he could not go along with the international definition of anti-Semitism because he believed it stopped him saying Zionism was from the very, very start a racist endeavor, which it was not, which doesn't mean that there weren't odd racists who embraced it. The important thing about getting this right is if almost the only way of understanding the often unreasoning hatred of Israel and the unreasoning hatred of Zionism and believing that Zionism always was a hateful entity is because it is in fact what people always suspected Jews were like.
Yeah.
If in the year 1400 or 1500, we'd have said to this or that Christian preacher, Israel is about to have its own country, what do you think it would be like? He would have described Israel as it's described in universities in this country now. They'll make it apartheid, they're proud, they're separate people, they're crude, they're cruel, they are unforgiving, it will be the most horrible place. In other words, they would have imagined an Israel that confirmed what people had been saying about Jews for 2,000 years. So Israel is the exemplification of the age-long hatred of the Jews. This was what they thought Jews were always like. And in that way, it's a godsend. Israel is a godsend because it proves what they were always saying. It was hard to make the case hundreds of years ago when Jews were a bedraggled people scattered across the earth that they were in cahoots with the devil and that they were running the world. If they were running the world, why did they look like that? Now it's much easier to say, look what happens. They're running this part of the world and then they'll run more of the world. This is what they do. And that's why it seems to me that you cannot slip away from Israel and saying, well, it's not me. It is you. It is every Jew because Israel bears the brunt of everything that's ever been said about every Jew. We're in this one together, whether we like it or not.
And so what you seem to be saying is there is a kind of that anti-Zionism is the anti-Semitism of our day, and that the same libels and slanders that were at the heart of not just anti-Semitism in the 19th century, but just old-fashioned Jew hatred before that, before Wilhelm Marr coined this term anti-Semitism, that there is essentially a continuum here. It's one and the same phenomenon. They're not separable. And the core case of the Israel bashers and the anti-Zionists on campus and elsewhere in the culture is that they are separable, that anti-Semitism is very, very bad, as Jeremy Corbyn liked to say, because he opposes all forms of racism, but that Zionism is not anti-Semitism and is in fact a racist endeavor. And your argument is this is a nonsense distinction.
Yes, this is a nonsense distinction. Anybody who knows what Zionism was knows that that's not a proper description of Zionism at all. Jeremy Corbyn never even knew what Zionism was. He would change the dates of when it started. As far as he was concerned, Zionism was just the imposition of Jewish will upon the country of Palestine. The history of it, how it came about, he knew nothing and felt he didn't have to know anything because it was enough for people on the left to see this was an imperialist, colonialist endeavor carried out by Jews who had been threatening to do that for the last 2,000 years. And now they got their opportunity.
I just have to ask you this, and this is somewhat tangential to our conversation, but it piques my curiosity. With Jeremy Corbyn, it was always hard to know whether the man was much more cunning or much more stupid than he let on. Do you have a view of that?
Well, I think stupid. I do think stupid. It's a fault of mine to think people with whom I disagree are stupid, and I know I should avoid it. But he did strike me as he had a stupid man's face, and he had a dead face.
I mean, I do too. So that goes for
no,
many
you don't.
people.
No, you don't. Not at all. But you don't want me to now compliment the intelligence in your eyes. No light of intelligence ever lit Corbyn's face. The only thing that lit Corbyn's face was a dead sort of contempt. I've never met Corbyn personally. I met plenty of anti-Semites. I never met Corbyn personally, but across the TV. Some things you can tell across the TV, he looked me in the face and he said, I hate you. I hate you because you're a Jew. I hate Jews. There's something about Jews I don't like. I don't like any Jews because they're quicker of mind than I am. Mm-hmm. I don't like you because you're hiding something all the time. I don't like you because, and then we're back to the whole, Marxist stuff, which he picked up. Again and again and again, he showed he could not understand, would not understand, because he could not understand what any Jewish complaint was. He never grasped it. And not to grasp why somebody else is upset by anything that you say is a form of stupidity. Intelligence makes you humane, and he lacked the humanity that comes with intelligence.
And you make the point, I mean, there's the old joke that the definition of an anti-Semite is someone who hates Jews more than is strictly necessary. I'm sure that will be held against me. It's a joke. But I mean, Corbyn, in fact, was willing to really sink his own party for the sake of denying, this is a point you make in your essay, the International Holocaust, what is it, the Remembrance Committee, or
yes, they accepted it. Yes.
For refusing to sign on to that definition of anti-Semitism. I mean, this was really hating Jews more than is absolutely necessary. The easiest, most politically expedient thing he could have done was say, well, of course we accept this definition, but he couldn't bring himself to do that. So there was a kind of a fanatical consistency there that defied his own political self-interest. I want to get back to another really redolent line in your essay. This time you're talking about Sarah Silverman, the American actress. You write, "We are not Israel," declared the Jewish comedian Sarah Silverman. And then you add, "Well, funnily enough, Sarah, we are. If you feel you are unfairly taking the flak for Israel, don't forget that Israel unfairly takes the flak for you." Just beautiful writing, but talk a little more on that.
Well, it's. I mean, I've just been there, really. It is that Israel is hated to the degree it is, I believe, because it bears, because it carries with it ancient assumptions of what Jews are. and which includes an ancient assumption of what Sarah Silverman is. If we are to be, there's no point in us saying we are together in our loathing of anti-Semitism if we don't see that anti-Zionism is another form of anti-Semitism on the cheap, and we will step outside that one. Yes, we don't like anti-Semitism. We're Jews, we're all Jews together, but I can tolerate a bit of anti-Zionism. I think we should not. I think we dare not, because anti-Zionism is the other face of anti-Semitism. It's anti-Semitism on the cheap. It's anti-Semitism that doesn't pretend to be anti-Semitic. It's anti-Semitism that says all racism is abhorrent to us, except one racism. And that's the racism that includes you, the Jew, because there's a very strange little shift that goes on here. And that is it possible to be racist to a Jew? Can we be racist to a Jew? Or hasn't the Jew, by virtue of the way he has behaved in Israel as they perceived it, stepped outside the right to not suffer racist language? Is not the Jew, by virtue of what he does in Israel at the moment, himself so racist that it is impossible to be racist when critical of him? I think that's a little twist of the mind that's...
I get the sense that this line, though, goes beyond that. I mean, earlier you were mentioning the fact that in some ways, Israel is a godsend to the anti-Semite, because they can say, well, look at Gaza or this or that sin, real or alleged, by Israel, is to confirm their view. But what you're really saying here, I think I read you correctly, is Jews would be immeasurably more vulnerable if there wasn't an Israel that essentially, as you put it, was unfairly taking the flak for them. That the Jewish position, for all of the criticism that Israel attracts not only for itself, but for Jews around the world, for the Sarah Silvermans of the world, and the discomfort that causes them in salons and arguments, and sometimes even on the streets of Hollywood, they are far more secure as Jews in LA, or you are far more secure as a Jew in London, because Israel is taking the flak unfairly for that it is steering away the fire, so to speak.
I like that way of putting it, and I don't think I'd worked that out. I think I was one step in simplicity before that. But that, of course, is the implication of what I'm saying. If people can now expend their hatred on Zionist Israel, then there's less to spare for you. The trouble with that argument is that there's always plenty to spare. And hatred is something that's never expended. You can't get to the end of it. So although it might appear to be saving you at the moment, and therefore as a consequence, many a Jew might fear, let them have it, let's give it. I do think that's a move that some Jews make, actually, which is to say, unconsciously, to heap some blame on Israel themselves, and by that way exonerate themselves of some of the crimes of which they're called guilty. And I'm interested in the ways in which it's intellectually and morally unallowable to say that, and also in terms of politics and expedience, a mistake. Because you're not going to get out of this. There's no getting out of this. They will, if this sounds melodramatic, but they will come for you when they've gone for the others.
Yes, it's feeding the crocodile in hopes that it will eat you last, I think is the Churchillian line. So let's talk about these Jewish students who are 18, 19 years old and going on campus. And you've provided them with some wonderful rhetorical ammunition. Do you think it can work?
I don't know. I mean, the writing this piece was, if I may put it like this, at the behest of my wife, who said, as we meet students, she says, they don't know what to say. They don't know how to answer that charge. She's got nephews and cousins and things, and she sees them struggling with this coming back from university. And she said they truly don't know what it is. So it's not just a rhetorical device, this advice to freshmen. The idea really was give them something, she said. Give them something, the kind of things you write in different kind of pieces that they can say when confronted by this. Show them, help them with what to say. Now, I don't know. I'd need to hear from some students as to whether they've taken up anything I've said in this piece and whether that helps them at all. I don't know whether it might help them to feel better within themselves, and that's not nothing. It might help them to feel less ashamed of themselves or less convinced that somehow or other they belong to a group of people who have done and continue to do iniquitous things. Whether it will help them in an argument with their mad tutor who thinks every word they say in favor of Jews or Israel is proof that they are in Netanyahu's pay, I don't know. We are dealing with people in some. I mean, it's a psychosis. We've known this for a long time. Anti-Semitism at that level is a psychosis. And whether you can ever argue anybody clearly and lucidly out of a psychosis, I doubt. I think it is more help them to feel better. Look, you have not done a terrible thing. Look, you were not, by virtue of being a Jew, responsible for the monstrosities that they say you are. This is the truth of the story. Or at least this is how to answer in yourself cruel charges that will make you feel rotten about being Jewish, and they shouldn't feel rotten about being Jewish.
This gets to something that a word you use in the essay, and I think you've used in other contexts, is the word disputatious. That you think of your Jewish identity. Tell me if I'm reading you wrong, but you think of your Jewish identity as not so much as a religious identity, but a kind of an inheritance of 5,000 years of disputation, of being someone who disagrees and is stiff-necked about it and holds to a view. And that seems to me, really at the core of a certain kind of Jewish identity. At the core of a certain different kind of Jewish identity is a desperate desire to fit in, right? This is kind of a crude typology here, but I think there's some truth to it, and I'd love to know your feelings about it. Your advice will work, I suspect, to the degree to which the young Jewish freshman or college student or whatever graduate student receives it, has that kind of quality of disputatiousness in his or her soul. And I guess that one of the things that I loved about the essay was that you are sort of contributing to the quality of telling the Jews to be disputatious, which is to be, most like themselves in their most Jewish way, right? For better, for better and worse. So do you think that's, first of all, is that analysis more or less on the money, or?
Yes, bang on.
And so is it possible to cultivate that somehow? Leaving aside whether you're ever going to win over anyone to your cause, you can win yourself over to yourself, right? You can win yourself over to your truest self. And that seems to me where your advice, really has some potency.
Yes. I've not met many Jews who find disputatiousness difficult to come by. I suppose what one wants really is to give them confidence particularly when they're young, to give them confidence that there is right on their side in being disputatious, that they don't have to lay down their arms because the culture seems to be so powerfully against them as it is. They go to university and they encounter lecturers of the kind that we briefly talked about. It must be quite tough for them. And it might be that what they do is they simply go inside, just go inside. They are capable of defending themselves. They do have arguments, but they'll leave those alone for the moment. And I suppose what I'd like is for them to feel confident that they have got a right. Do they even feel they have a right to argue? Even if in their soul they think that's not right, that can't be right. That's not who we are. That's not what we've done, but I don't want to upset. I don't want to upset them in this society or in that society. I don't want to upset my lecturer. I want them to have the confidence that that's what, go out there and be bold and Jewish and full of argument, and whether you will win the argument or not doesn't matter, but to just be the thing, I mean, there are many, many disadvantages to being Jewish, as we all know, and many people have suffered them far more than our generation, thank God, do. So enjoy the advantages we do have. And one of the advantages we do have is we are very good talkers. We see things, we see an argument and what's wrong or what's right with an argument very, very clearly. It's why we've made good philosophers. It's why we've made good lawyers. It's why we've made good comedians, because part of that sequence of dispute and philosophic and legal dispute is that there's a joke at the end of it. Comedy comes at the end of that. We make the best jokes. Everybody knows. No one would dispute that we make the best jokes, and we make the best jokes because of that disputatiousness in our nature, and because we're so good at seeing the absurdity of ourselves as beings, but of other people when they argue against us. I mean, the truth is, the stuff that's being argued against Israel is grossly, it's not just wrong and unfair, it's absurd. It's just that when people say, for example, that the Israelis have gone out and shot children in the street, they've looked for children, they send an air force out and they look for children, and there's Palestinian children, and let's kill Palestinian children. Why?
Well,
why would they do that? Why the hell would they do that?
A lot of ammunition from the pages of The Guardian and much of the British press. That's also the case.
Yes, and because this I talk about this in the piece. It's unmistakable. It goes, the idea of the Israeli Air Force willfully and deliberately killing children. Leave aside the inhumanity, which I don't believe there's any reason to charge the Israeli Air Force with, but the sheer bad politics of it, the sheer stupidity of it, which is not what Jews are normally accused of being too shrewd, not too stupid. Why? It's so obviously not true. And you think, well, where's that untruth come from? Oh, yes, we've been killing children in the street for no good reason for 2,000 years. And what have we been killing them for? To turn them into matzah.
Let me ask you,
do you want matzah made of Gentile blood? Do you have a hankering for Gentile?
Personally, I faint at the sight of blood. So, exactly. like many Jews,
almost every Jew faints at the sight of blood, except those who become doctors.
Exactly, and there are a few of those as well. I want to ask you, but first of all, I just want to say to our audience, I will soon turn it over to your questions, and I'm seeing that they're coming over to the Q&A function. But as I may be coming to you soon, so if you have a question in mind, put it in the Q&A chat box, and I will try to get to you. One final question I'm very curious about, Howard. Leaving the students to one side, among your peers or near peers of writers, intellectuals, journalists, thought leaders, I guess is the expression, in Britain, has anything changed for the better since the Corbyn fiasco? Do you feel like, is there any optimism, or is it the same old thing? Is it just a slight embarrassment over Corbyn being gauche, but the same kind of thinking? Has anything shifted that you can see, at least among the people you socialize with?
I feel this is one of those things you may wake up in the following morning and have reason to regret. I feel there is, leave the universities aside, I feel there is a greater Jewish boldness about English Jewish life at the moment. When Philip Roth used to come here 30 years ago, he talked about the Jews as being the most tedious, boring bunch of people he'd ever known. They were confident about being Jewish, and they allowed the most impossible anti-Semitism to thrive. The anti-Semitism that Philip Roth saw doesn't exist. It is not the case that every time a Gentile goes into a restaurant and sees a Jew, that Gentile demands the windows to be thrown up. That's what Philip Roth thought he saw. Complete madness. But nonetheless, there was a leave aside the anti-Semitism, there was a provinciality about English Jewish life that he saw, which is true. We did cower a bit. I feel there's much less of that cowering now. I think there are more Jewish artists, more Jewish painters, more Jewish writers. I think there is a Jewish conversation going on now, which is a lot less cowed than it was. And I think that's terrific.
Last question before we go to the audience. Do you see that reflected in Jewish journalism in the JC? I find myself reading it a lot more. Maybe that's me, or maybe it's the quality.
I think so a bit. I think so a bit, and more confident Jews are used to be felt for a little while as a very provincial place. You know, like for the JC, you're just talking to yourself, and what are you talking to your own for? I think more people, more confident and well-known and professional writers are writing for the JC. There's a magazine called Jewish Renaissance, which has been out here for about 20 years, which is good. We've got the Jewish Quarterly has been reborn. I think there is good Jewish journalism now, yes.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to the audience, but we should start with a joke from Marcelo Pacman, who asks, what's a psychiatrist? The answer is a Jewish doctor who hates blood. It's a pretty good joke.
Good. And germane to our, yeah.
Exactly. All right, Irene Lancaster, whom I remember from a previous conversation, so I think she's Manchester-based, disputes something you said at the very beginning. She says, anti-Semitism in the UK has been evident for 25 to 30 years. Corbyn is not the cause, he is simply one effect. And being married to Jews doesn't always mean much, referring to Keir Starmer. And she then says, you are not part of the Jewish community and have not evinced evidence of sympathy and empathy with the Jewish community. So since we're being
who's not part of the Jewish community?
You are.
Me?
Yes, this is what she's alleging.
Well, how do I prove that I am part of the Jewish community? I am part of the Jewish community. I spend all my life talking to Jews. I have the word Jew on my lips. If she means I don't go to shul as often maybe as she goes, she's right. But how would she know that?
It's a good question.
Is this someone who's been secretly tailing me around London?
Irene Lancaster is presumably hearing what we're saying, so maybe she has been. But in the spirit of being disputatious, I asked the question. Right. Jennifer Malvin, however, praises you for brilliant commentary, insights so articulately expressed. All right, this is not a question; it's just praise for us. So we'll
I'm happy to listen to the praise for a little bit.
Yes. Hang on a second. Karina Grossman. There seems to be confusion about the term Zionism, which is the idea that Jews have a right to have their own country. Policies and actions carried out by Israeli governments is not Zionism gone wrong, it is policies that one can criticize. Do you want to reflect on that?
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, I would agree with that. Zionism was the thing that she said it was, and but there have been consequences to that. The moment we feel that Jews have a right indeed to their own country, then history will tell you that whenever people feel they have a right to a country, how do they get it if they're not already there? By what means do they get it? Will there be, how much cruelty can we tolerate in their attempt to get their country back or to resettle? There's bound to be some. So the argument then becomes about, the degree of it. And I think there can be many arguments about what has or hasn't gone wrong with Zionism. For me, the important one, and I've said it from the start really, is it is not a disreputable ambition to want to return home. And if it were a disreputable to say you want self-determination, then you can't have it both ways. You can't say the Jews never had any right to self-determination, but the Palestinians do. If you believe that the Palestinians have a right to self-determination, then you must believe that the Jews always did. This works both ways. And those who believe that the Jews have a right to their own place must understand why Palestinians feel the same way. Each side needs to understand that the other side feels very much what they feel.
Right. It's what Amos Oz, I remember, calling not a question of right versus wrong, but right versus right, which was a very Amos Ozian formulation. Yeah. And it sounds like that would speak for you. I have actually, fortunately, people. One of the problems with Jewish events is that when you ask people to put something in the Q&A function, nothing seems to have a question mark, but there are a couple here.
That's in the nature of being Jewish.
It's in the nature of being Jewish. So Martin Fletcher asks, Howard, you give ammo to Jewish students, ammunition to Jewish students to respond to other students attacking the Jews in Israel. You also say that kind of anti-Semitism is a psychosis which can't be overcome. In other words, words don't help us. So what's a student to do in the face of anti-Semitism? Argue, lose, and walk away? Question mark.
I think get to know your intellectual rights, get to know what it's proper to say and what it's proper to feel. Muster the best arguments. Do not be cowed. Know where the people in whose name you speak have been blameless, and know where they have not been. And speak those truths. Speak those truths to one another. Speak it to your own soul. Know it. Don't be frightened. And then speak it to the psychotic academic. And who knows? And who knows? Either you will change his mind, or you will frighten him out of his job.
You know, I think that's extraordinarily important, because every Jewish conversation, in my experience, is really a conversation with yourself as to whether you want to remain a Jew. To Fletcher's question, in some sense, the anti-Semites or the virulent anti-Zionists or virulent, quote, criticizers of Israel, the moral function they serve, if they serve any moral function, is that they force you to kind of come up with the question, well, do I want to remain in this business of being a Jew? Which is to say, standing up for a tradition which has held on for 5,000 years, which I feel deeply in my soul, which matters to me for any number of reasons. And so the fact that it's a kind of psychosis, as it often is almost beside the point, because you're not really talking to them. You're not really talking to the John Mearsheimers of the world, or whoever it might be, who just have it in. You're essentially talking to yourself and saying, do I want to have this fight? And it's not really a fight against them. It's a fight for an idea of Jewishness that I hold within. That's, at least, this is now my interpolation, but it seems like it speaks for.
But an educator or a writer, and a good writer is an educator, will want that person that you're describing, that self you're describing, yourself, myself, to have the best possible argument with himself.
Right.
Not to be faint-hearted, not to buy what's not true, not to be made faint-hearted or self-disgusted by accounts that are false. That worries me quite a lot, that Jews have been made to. It doesn't take a lot. I mean, Jewish self-disgust goes back a long way, and it's the consequence of people telling you over and over and over and again what a wretch you are, and that never stops. And people have been bailing out of Jewishness for hundreds of years because they've grown, either because it's got too dangerous to stay in, or because somewhere in their heart they feel, what if that's true? Maybe it is true. I am that wretch. And I think the purpose of my
wish I could say that
is to stop people thinking that. Stop a Jew thinking. You might be a wretch personally, but you're not a wretch by virtue of being Jewish. You are not.
Here's a question that comes out of a different side of the field, from Emma Needleman. And she asks, do you think that the idea of a Jewish novelist is an anachronism in 2021?
What would have happened to make it an anachronism in 2021, but not an anachronism 10 years ago? No, I do not. Jewish novelists, what might be an anachronism is any novelist who isn't Jewish. Let's get rid of them, and then let's just leave the novel to those people who do it best of all, and have done it best of all for the last half century, the Jew. The novel, after I saw it said once by someone, that every novel is really a commentary on Torah, or the Talmud, or a continuation of Talmud argument.
Pride and Prejudice is a continuation of the Talmud.
It's hard with her. It's hard with her, but I believe, give me the time, give me a year to come back, and I'll do your piece for you on how Jane Austen is in fact a Talmudic writer.
Consider yourself commissioned.
But certainly, as far as the modern novel is concerned, I mean, that's what, in the last 50 years, with that staggering flowering of the novel in America, That's what they were all, though. I mean, what was Isaac Bashevis Singer doing? What was Saul Bellow doing? What was Roth doing? What was Mail? They were all in that kind of an argument of the kind you were talking about. Do we want to be a Jew? Do we want to go on being a Jew? And the novel is a good place for that. I don't know why it would be. I mean, I'd need a longer conversation with the questioner to know what that questioner means, what's happened in 2021 that means we don't need, because that's what she said, we don't need a Jewish novelist. I think we always need a Jewish novelist as long as he's articulate, funny, and right.
Here's in the service of disputation. Here's a question from Carol Stockton. She asks, how can ardent North American Zionists, and I know you don't speak for North America, how can ardent North American Zionists stay engaged with an Israel that has engaged in a 50+ year occupation with no end in sight? I suppose that applies to English Zionists as well.
Well, you have to engage, don't you? You have to engage, and might be that 50 years isn't all that long, really, in the history of things for which we think there will be no solution, and then in the end there is. The one thing I don't think that hasn't happened, that hasn't helped, is it's been a very clever campaign against Zionism in that it has turned the world against Israel, certainly in its Zionist phase, and it's turned many Jews against it too. Who has it helped? Who has that helped? And I would have thought a more intelligent engagement with Zionism, in which fewer people will buy into the idea that it is an inherent cruelty, which doesn't mean it doesn't have cruel manifestations. If it had been more understandably or generously treated, who's to say that the situation wouldn't have changed? How does it help Palestinians to be told, as they are told, that they are to make no concessions to Israel, that they must wait for history to reveal itself, and it will reveal itself when the Jews are kicked out of the country and Palestine is theirs again from the river to the sea? How does that help them? It doesn't. Right.
Hang on, a different question. Anne Choman, I might be mispronouncing her surname, writes, wouldn't it be beneficial for Jewish students to organize non-Jewish allies on campus? Jews are so outnumbered versus anti-Semites. Let me refine that question a little bit. Are you getting the sense that Jews on campuses, we were discussing Majid Nawaz just before our conversation began, that there are strains of kind of philo-Semitism operating in Britain so that the Jews don't feel completely on their own?
There is philo-Semitism in Britain. There definitely is. How much of it you would find on campus, I don't know. I would have thought you're going to find some. I don't know about Jews organizing themselves. I come back to the importance of Jewish students, all Jews, but certainly Jewish students, arming themselves with whatever we mean by truth, but going in search of a truth, not being frightened of it, not being frightened of what's said about them, and being able to talk to people who don't know much. One of the things that you will discover if you discuss Zionism or Israel or Jewishness with people who aren't Jewish is they don't know anything. They actually don't know very much at all. They've either not come across many Jews, and they are frightened of Jews. They make assumptions about who Jews are and what Jews look like. And as far as the politics are concerned, they know nothing. There are people marching through the streets with banners and things who wouldn't be able to tell you what Zionism even means, when it started, what it's for, what it did. So if Jews can educate themselves, first educate yourself. And don't be browbeaten by somebody who is giving you nonsense. Educate yourself, and then educate your fellows. Isn't that what's meant to happen in a university?
It used to be
naive. Am I being impossibly naive now?
You're being naive. You're supposed to be indoctrinated at university and then get it all out of your system later on, which reminds me, there's a question here. Let me find it because it was a good one. And now I can't seem to find it, but the gist of the question, so I'm sorry I can't name the questioner. The gist of the question is, you're giving advice to the Jewish freshman. What is your advice to the Jewish senior? That is to say, there's someone who's now coming out into the world. Does the advice change in any meaningful way?
Well, it will be unnecessary if he's taken my advice and gone through university and survived it and read well and thought well. He won't need my advice anymore. He's now in a position to give advice, or she's in a position to give advice. They are to their children. Pass it on.
And they're now in a position to go into a line of work which isn't simply an indoctrination factory.
You hope,
which is what.
So.
Now, Herb Saperstein asks, I appreciated your piece giving. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is. I've now realized this was the very question that I had. It was Herb Saperstein's question that I just asked. So I'm going to look for a final question in the final minutes that we have. And let me see if I can find something that is apropos. 1 second. Jennifer Malvin says something very nice about a speaking appearance I made. Thank you. Oh, here, final question from Robert Friedman. Liel Leibowitz, who's one of your co-authors in this issue and a wonderful writer for Tablet, said that at some point, he said, at some point, these people hate you, so just walk away. And what do you think of that advice? By these people, I mean the anti-Zionists, the anti-Semites, the faculty, and so on.
It's hard to do it at a university. I mean, if you meet somebody in a street that wants to rail about what's happening in Israel, you might choose to walk away. You can't do that quite so easily at a university. I think you have to fight back. I think you have to hold your position. I think you have to make, it's an opportunity, apart from anything else, apart from all the disadvantages of being at university if you're Jewish at the moment, apart from all the things that there are to fear and be disappointed by, it is a wonderful opportunity. And it is an opportunity because not everybody has closed their ears, not everybody has made up their mind about what's true and what's not true. It's a wonderful opportunity for you to be persuasive, for you to be eloquent, for you to tell a truth that maybe they've not heard before, for you to be an educator. Isn't that the idea? We don't just go to universities to be educated. We go to university to educate. So no, don't back away. Teach them.
That's a lovely coda, a lovely way to end this conversation, Howard. And I just want to really thank you for, again, just a marvel of an essay, a delight for not just a reader, but a delight for an editor, and that it took essentially no editing except to Americanize a handful of terms. I want to thank my colleagues at the Maimonides Fund and at SAPIR for helping put on these conversations. SAPIR is subtitled A Journal of Jewish Conversations, and that's what we're trying to do, which is why I always look for the antagonistic questions, because everyone should participate in this. But most of all, Howard, I want to thank you for sharing an hour of your time and for sharing it so wisely and eloquently. And I would love to get that Austin essay from you at some point, because I think that would be a world of fun. Someone made the point in the questions that both Pride and Prejudice and the Bible itself begin with unforgettable epigrammatic first sentences. So there you are.
There's the start of my piece. Thank that person. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you at our next conversation. And to those of you in the United States, have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Bret. Most enjoyed it. Thank you. And thank the magazine and Maimonides. Thank you.